Picture this. You are standing right in the middle of the Thar Desert.
Right.
It is a punishing, 115 degrees Fahrenheit. You're keeping a very careful eye out for a local highly venomous snake called a crate.
Oh, yeah, you definitely want to watch out for those.
Right. But in your hands, you hold this solar-charged digital tablet, and it's connected to a global satellite network. And the crazy part is, the sand beneath your boots is burying the perfectly grid-aligned brick streets of a lost 4,500-year-old civilization.
That is, wow, it's a really striking image. And honestly, it perfectly encapsulates the deep dive we have for you today.
It really does.
Because we are looking at this massive stack of sources detailing the Pakistani province of Sindh. And, well, what makes this material so compelling is exactly that timeline you just illustrated.
Yeah, the contrast is just wild.
It is. We're tracking the story of a region that birthed literally one of the earliest urban civilizations in human history, all the way up to its most recent, just monumental milestone, which is Pakistan's first ever massively complex, fully digital population census.
And to really grasp the scale of what we're talking about here, we need to sort of locate you on the map first.
Right.
So Sindh is the southeastern province of Pakistan. You've got the Arabian Sea to the south.
Which is crucial for trade, obviously.
Exactly. And then the Thar Desert stretching to the east, and the Kirthar Mountains acting as this massive wall to the west. Today, it holds the country's second largest population. We're talking over 55 million people.
Yeah, 55 million.
Plus, it is home to Pakistan's undisputed economic powerhouse, which is the mega city of Karachi.
Right, but you have to think about the environment. Those 55 million people are living in a remarkably extreme, semi-arid landscape.
It's blistering.
It is, which naturally brings up the question of human settlement, right? Like,
Yeah.
why build a civilization in an environment that harsh to begin with?
And the answer, tracking all the way back to antiquity, is water.
Yes, the lifeblood of the entire region.
Even the name tells that story, doesn't it? I mean, I was looking at the etymology and the sources, and the word Sindh is actually a Persian derivative of an ancient Sanskrit word.
Right, Sindhu.
Yeah, Sindhu. And it literally just means river. It's a direct reference to the mighty Indus River.
And the linguistic footprint of that single river is just, it's massive.
Right.
Because when the Greeks arrived under Alexander the Great around 325 BCE, they adapted that local word into Indos.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and that adaptation eventually gave the English language the word Indus. So the river, the region of Sindh, and eventually the entire nation of India, they all trace their names back to that single concept of the river.
That's amazing. Okay, so let's look at the people who originally harnessed that river, the Indus Valley civilization.
Yes, the ancients.
Specifically, their crown jewel city, Mohenjodaro, which was built around 2500 BCE. Now, I went into the supply material expecting, dusty, primitive ruins, but the urban planning is staggering.
It really is.
I mean, they were contemporaneous with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, right?
Right.
But they had these standardized bricks, gridded streets, covered sewerage systems. I have to admit, I genuinely struggle to visualize how a society functions at that level thousands of years ago.
Well, think about the mechanics of standardized bricks alone.
Okay.
To have every single brick in a massive city be the exact same uniform ratio.
Wait, they were all uniform?
Yes, the exact same ratio.
Uh-huh.
And that requires a highly sophisticated central authority. You need standardized weights and measures and just massive logistical coordination. They weren't just stacking stones,
Right.
They engineered a society.
That's blowing my mind a little bit.
Right. And their sewage system was actually more advanced than what many European cities had in the 18th century.
Are you serious? The 18th century?
I'm serious. They were funneling wastewater away from homes to maintain public health in a dense urban center 4,500 years ago.
Okay, but wait. I also read in the sources that they found almost no evidence of weapons or warfare. How do archaeologists even know that? Did they just, miss the armories?
That's a common question, actually. But the archaeological record is famously devoid of specialized weaponry. There are no large-scale defensive fortifications, and they haven't found evidence of battle trauma on the skeletal remains.
Wow. So they were just peaceful.
It seems that way. Instead of channeling their competitive energies into conquering their neighbors, the evidence suggests they funneled their resources into complex trade networks and civic infrastructure.
Because they had the resources to do it.
Exactly. At the time, generous monsoon rains created this condition of immense agricultural surplus.
Which makes their disappearance even more confusing to me.
Yeah, It's a mystery to a lot of people.
You have this peaceful, highly advanced society with, frankly, great plumbing and plenty of food. But by the 19th century BCE, they just abandoned Mohenjodaro.
Right.
If it wasn't a massive invading army, what pushes an entire population out of a prehistoric metropolis?
The culprit was actually the sky.
The sky? You mean the weather?
Yeah. The region experienced this slow, devastating climate shift known as aridification.
Oh, wow.
So over centuries, the predictable monsoon weather patterns, they just began to taper off and shift eastward.
Right.
This wasn't some sudden cinematic apocalypse, right? It was a slow, multi-generational squeeze.
Just slowly drying out.
Exactly. The water table dropped, the river's flow became way less reliable, and that massive agricultural surplus just vanished. The population simply couldn't sustain its density, so they were forced to disperse eastward to survive.
That is a haunting concept. The ultimate infrastructure totally defeated by changing weather patterns.
It's a sobering thought, for sure.
But obviously, the land didn't stay empty forever. The sources show this massive revolving door of empires moving in afterward.
Look, constant churn. You had the Achaemenids, which was the ancient Persian Empire, then the Greeks came through, then the Mauryans, an ancient Indian empire.
And one after another.
Yeah. But to understand the modern demographic reality of the 55 million people living in Sindh today, we actually have to look to a much later cultural shift in the 8th century.
Right, the arrival of Islam.
Exactly.
In 712 CE, an Arab general named Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh, and he annexes it to the Umayyad Caliphate.
Which at the time was a sprawling early Islamic empire. It literally stretched from Spain all the way to the Indian subcontinent.
That's a massive footprint.
Huge. And this annexation earned Sindh a very powerful historical title. They called it Babul Islam, which translates to the Gateway of Islam.
And when you look at the recent 2023 census data, that legacy is completely dominant today.
Right. Muslims make up about 90% of Sindh's population now.
Right. But here's where the data gets incredibly layered. Because despite being the gateway of Islam, Sindh also retains the highest percentage of Hindus in all of Pakistan.
Yes, around 8.8%.
Which is almost 5 million people. And in some rural areas in the Thar Desert, like the Umarkot district, Hindus actually make up the majority.
They do, yeah.
And I have to push back here for a second because history usually tells us that an overwhelming religious majority rarely coexists peacefully with a minority over centuries. How did they avoid constant violent friction?
Well, the mechanism that bridged that divide, and it's really fascinating, was Sufism.
Sufism?
Yeah. Now, Sufism isn't a separate religion. It's the mystical, inward-facing dimension of Islam. Instead of focusing purely on, rigid legalism, Sufism emphasizes a direct, personal, and often ecstatic connection to the divine.
Okay.
And crucially, it is highly adaptable. It readily absorbs and blends with local, cultural, and spiritual traditions.
So it essentially acted as a cultural bridge.
A profound one, yes.
Yeah.
You had Sufi mystics and poets like the revered Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai, who wrote these verses that resonated deeply with both Islamic theology and local Hindu philosophies.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It really is. And to visualize how deeply this penetrated the culture, you just have to look at the Makli necropolis near Sada.
I saw pictures of this in the sources. It's massive.
It's a graveyard covering 10 square kilometers. And local legend claims it holds the graves of 125,000 Sufi saints and mystics.
That is just an unimaginable number of graves.
And the key thing is, these saints are venerated by both Sindhi Muslims and Sindhi Hindus. They literally share the same physical spaces for spiritual reflection.
But surely that shared cultural fabric was tested during the 1947 partition of India and Pakistan, right? Because the violence in places like Punjab during partition was notoriously horrific. Neighbor turning on neighbor. Did Sindh somehow manage to escape that?
The contrast with Punjab is arguably the most remarkable part of Sindh's modern history.
Really?
Yeah. While Punjab devolved into just awful sectarian bloodshed, violence did not define the Sindhi partition experience. Because that Sufi-infused culture of tolerance was so deeply rooted, there was actually very little local neighbor-on-neighbor violence in Sindh.
Wait, so the Sindhi Hindus who left, why did they leave then?
When they did migrate to India, the historical record shows they mostly left out of a fear of the unknown. Specifically, they had anxiety about the millions of new refugees pouring into the province from India.
I see.
Yeah, it wasn't due to actual persecution by the local Sindhi Muslims that they had lived alongside for generations.
That internal resilience is amazing, but it didn't insulate them from outside powers wanting to control the Indus Valley's wealth, did it?
No, definitely not.
The The sources list all these local dynasties, the Sumras, Samas, Kalhoras, Talpurs. They're constantly navigating the authority of larger empires like the Delhi Sultanate or the Mughals.
All right.
And then in 1843, the British East India Company basically kicks down the door.
Led by General Charles Napier, who defeated the ruling Talpur dynasty.
Okay, we have to mention how Napier announced this victory because it might honestly be the most arrogant, terrible pun in military history.
Oh, it's famous.
He reportedly sent a single-word telegram to his superiors back home. In Latin, he just wrote, "Peccavi,"
which translates to "I have sinned."
Right, a homophonic play on "I have sinned," S-I-N-D-H.
I have sinned. Yeah, it's incredibly witty, but also incredibly dark when you think about it.
It tells you everything about how the British viewed the territory. It wasn't a society to them. It was a line item on a ledger, just an economic asset.
Exactly. They just wanted the infrastructure so they could extract raw materials and flood the market with British goods.
Which totally dictated their administrative strategy. I mean, they unceremoniously folded Sindh into the Bombay presidency.
Yeah, which was a disaster for the locals. Being ruled from a massive distance caused immense local frustration. Both Muslim and Hindu Sindhis felt entirely marginalized by Bombay. They finally managed to become a separate province again in 1936.
But the British economic meddling during that time actually backfired on them, didn't it? The sources mention that British policies inadvertently fueled the movement for an independent Pakistan. How exactly does an economic policy lead to a national independence movement?
Well, it happened by fundamentally altering the concept of land ownership.
Okay, walk me through that.
So before the British arrived, the local economy was complex. You had the Muslim landed elite, who were called the Wadaras, and the Hindu commercial and money-lending class, known as the Banayas.
Right.
For a long time, these two groups basically collaborated to squeeze the predominantly Muslim peasant farmers.
Oh, so the original tension was class-based, not strictly religious.
Precisely. It was a class dynamic. But then the British introduced these new, rigid systems of private property rights and aggressive tax collection that heavily favored the liquid capital of the Hindu commercial class.
I see where this is going.
Yeah, suddenly Muslim landowners who couldn't pay these new British taxes in cash had to borrow from the Hindu moneylenders, and this was all under strict British legal frameworks. When they inevitably defaulted, the land was legally transferred. So massive tracts of Sindh moved from Muslim to Hindu ownership.
So the British effectively weaponized the legal system against the Muslim landowners.
Exactly. And that economic friction was the breaking point. The Sindhi Muslim elite began to view the Hindu commercial class not as local collaborators anymore, but as insurmountable economic rivals backed by British law.
Wow.
So when the political demand for a separate Muslim state emerged, the Sindhi elite saw a golden opportunity. Supporting the creation of Pakistan wasn't just about religious ideology for them, it was a calculated economic maneuver.
They wanted to push out their competitors.
Right, to push out their Hindu competitors and reclaim control of the region's resources. That economic imperative is the real reason why Sindh became the very first province to officially endorse the Pakistan movement in 1940.
It is wild how a change in a tax law can literally redraw the map of the world a century later.
It really is.
Okay, so bringing us into the modern era of an independent Pakistan, we have 55 million people living in this province today, and we really need to talk about the physical reality they're dealing with right now because it sounds punishing.
It is an extreme, semi-arid environment. Summer temperatures frequently break 46 degrees Celsius.
Which is about 115 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right, it's intense.
And the rainfall is essentially a rounding error. 7 inches a year. They completely miss the major monsoon seasons.
Yeah, Sindh sits in this sort of geographical blind spot. It's wedged between two major monsoon systems, but rarely receives the bounty of either.
That's so unlucky.
It is. Therefore, just like the ancient citizens of Mohenjodaro, the modern population relies almost entirely on the inundations of the Indus River, which is fed by snowmelt from the Himalayas far to the north.
Yet somehow, this harsh, dry environment supports massive, completely unique wildlife.
Oh, the biodiversity is fascinating.
The sources list the endangered blind Indus River dolphin, giant olive ridley turtles nesting on the coast, the pala fish, which is the sable fish that swims all the way up the Indus from the ocean just to spawn.
Yeah.
And of course, the Sindh crate, the venomous snake I mentioned at the top of the deep dive. Local folklore claims it slithers onto the chests of sleeping people in the Thar Desert and sucks the breath right out of them.
I mean, the snake is real, but the breath-sucking is definitely a myth.
It's terrifying either way. But stepping back from the folklore, How does an environment with barely any rain support huge river dolphins and a massive human agricultural sector growing, like mangoes and bananas?
Well, it all happens through an incredibly delicate, high-stakes balancing act of water management.
Okay.
The survival of those river dolphins, the health of the coastal mangroves in the Indus Delta, and the viability of millions of acres of farmland. All of it depends on exactly how much water is pulled from the Indus before it reaches the sea.
It's a zero-sum game.
It really is. In a semi-arid zone, human consumption, agriculture, and ecology are in a daily, fierce competition for the exact same drops of water.
Which brings us to the ultimate question for any listener, right? Why should you care about this specific balancing act? And the answer is that managing water for 55 million people in a blistering environment is a real-time blueprint for what much of the world is going to face as global temperatures rise.
Yes, absolutely.
And to manage those resources, you need to know exactly who is consuming them and where. Enter the 2023 digital census.
Yes. The 7th Population and Housing Census,
Yeah.
executed by the Pakistan Bureau of Statistics. And honestly, this was a monumental logistical achievement. It was the country's first ever fully digital census.
I really want to dig into the how here because the numbers are staggering. 126,000 digital tablets deployed, 120,000 enumerators trained. They even built a self-enumeration web portal used by 2.6 million households.
It was a massive undertaking.
But how do you actually execute a digital census in rural desert environments, places where you might not have reliable electricity, let alone a cell signal?
That was the biggest hurdle. And they solved it by engineering the software to work completely offline.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The enumerators carried tablets equipped with internal GPS modules that didn't require an active cellular connection to pinpoint their location.
Okay, that makes sense.
So they would input the household data locally on the device, and the software would digitally stamp the exact geographic coordinates to that specific entry.
Oh, wow.
And then, once the enumerator finally traveled back into a zone with internet connectivity, the tablet would securely sync that massive encrypted data packet back to the central servers in Islamabad.
That's brilliant. And I imagine that prevents someone from just, sitting in a coffee shop in Karachi and making up numbers for a rural village.
Exactly. That was a huge concern with paper censuses. But this system utilized geofencing.
Geofencing.
Yeah, the system knew if the tablet was actually inside the boundaries of the assigned enumeration block when the data was entered. It drastically reduced the margin of human error and, frankly, political manipulation. It yielded a highly accurate, granular snapshot of the population.
And that snapshot gave us the official number, 55.69 million people in Sindh. It also revealed a massive urbanization trend. Nearly 54% of the province is living in cities now. I mean, Karachi alone is pushing 18.9 million residents.
It's a megacity in every sense of the word.
But aside from just having accurate trivia, what is the functional power of that data? Why go through all this effort?
Because granularity dictates survival in a place like this.
Granularity dictates survival. I like that.
It's true. Knowing the GPS coordinate of every household means the government can map population density directly against the water table.
Tying it back to the water.
Always back to the water. It determines how the federal government allocates funding, how many representatives a district gets in parliament, where you need to build the next hospital, and crucially, how you route the agricultural canals.
And they are going to need every single ounce of that data because the growth projections I saw in the sources are staggering.
They are. If the province's current total fertility rate of 3.6 children per woman holds steady, demographic models project that Sindh's population could more than double. Yes. We are looking at a potential population of 111 million people by the year 2050.
111 million people.
Yeah.
Wow. Let's take a breath and summarize the sheer scale of the timeline we just covered today.
Yeah, that's a lot.
We started with the perfectly aligned, standardized bricks of Mohenjodaro thousands of years ago. We tracked the arrival of Islam and the binding, unifying cultural force of Sufism.
Right.
We saw how British tax laws over land ownership inadvertently planted the economic seeds for the creation of Pakistan. And we end up in the sprawling modern metropolis of Karachi, managing the lives of millions using geofenced digital tablets. I mean, it is a masterclass in human adaptation.
It really is an incredible story of adaptation. But, it also forces us to confront a very uncomfortable historical parallel.
What do you mean?
Well, we know definitively from the ruins of the Indus Valley civilization that a peaceful, highly advanced society was forced to abandon this exact same geography thousands of years ago because of climate aridification.
Right. The sky turned on them.
Exactly. The water simply stopped supporting the population. And today, Sindh's population is rocketing toward 100 million, and they are entirely dependent on that very same single river system in a world that is getting demonstrably hotter.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
So the lingering question you have to walk away with is, well, will digital data, satellite tablets, and modern technology be enough to help them engineer their way out of the fate that swallowed their ancient ancestors?